Commander Thane pressed his clawed hands against the cold metal of the observation deck as he stared out at the strange fleet before them. His green scales rippled with confusion as he studied the 12 human ships floating silently in space. They looked wrong somehow. Not wrong like damaged or broken, but wrong like a puzzle missing important pieces. "Sir, I have completed the tactical scan," reported Lieutenant Cav from behind him. The young officer's voice carried the same bewilderment that Thane felt in his chest. The human vessels show no external weapon systems. No plasma cannons, no missile tubes, no kinetic batteries. Nothing. Thane turned away from the viewport and walked to the central command platform where holographic displays showed detailed images of the enemy fleet. The human ships were beautiful in their simplicity. Their hulls curved and flowed like water frozen in space, completely smooth except for what appeared to be engine exhausts at the rear. They reminded him of the graceful sea creatures from his homeworld, all elegant lines and hidden purpose. "Perhaps they are merchant vessels," suggested Captain Drell, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he examined the data. "Their military ships might be hiding somewhere nearby, waiting to ambush us." Admiral Corex, Supreme Commander of the Corvani Armada, stepped into the command center. His massive frame cast shadows across the deck as he approached the tactical displays. Unlike his subordinates, Corex showed no confusion, only irritation. He had fought in dozens of battles across 3 star systems and had never encountered ships without visible weapons. "Merchants do not travel in perfect military formation," Corex growled, his deep voice echoing off the metal walls. "Merchants do not maintain synchronized shield frequencies. Merchants do not position themselves defensively at the edge of contested space." Thane nodded and highlighted several details on the display. The human ships held positions that any military officer would recognize as a battle formation. Their spacing allowed for mutual shield support and coordinated maneuvering. Their angle relative to the Corvani fleet suggested they were ready to engage or retreat at a moment's notice. "Then where are their guns?" asked Lieutenant Cav. "Every warship in the galaxy displays its weapons. It serves as both intimidation and practical necessity. How do they plan to fight without cannons?" The question hung in the air like smoke from damaged circuits. Thane had wondered the same thing since their sensors first detected the human fleet 3 hours ago. His people had built warships for over 2,000 years. Every design followed the same basic principles: thick armor, powerful shields, and enough firepower to crack a moon in half. The weapons were always visible, mounted on the outside where they could rotate and target enemies efficiently. These human ships violated every rule of military engineering that Thane knew. They looked more like racing yachts than battle cruisers. Their hulls showed no signs of weapon ports that could open when needed. No hidden panels that might conceal surprise armaments. Just smooth, reflective surfaces that seemed to mock conventional wisdom. "Admiral," called the communications officer from her station near the back of the command center. "We are receiving a transmission from the lead human vessel." Corex straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put it through." The main display flickered and showed the bridge of the human flagship. A woman with short brown hair and calm blue eyes appeared on screen. Her uniform was simple compared to the elaborate decorations that Corvani officers wore. She sat relaxed in her command chair as if facing overwhelming odds meant nothing to her. "I am Captain Emma Blake of the Earth Defense Ship Defiance," she said in clear, measured tones. "You have entered human patrol space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Admiral Corex stepped forward so the human could see him clearly. His battle scars and decorated armor were meant to intimidate. Most species showed proper fear when faced with his imposing presence. Captain Blake showed no reaction at all. She simply waited for his response with the patience of someone who had all the time in the universe. "I am Admiral Corex of the Corvani Armada," he announced. "You are trespassing in territory claimed by the Corvani Empire. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The human captain tilted her head slightly. "Admiral, our records show this region of space is unclaimed by any galactic authority. We are conducting routine patrols under interstellar law. Perhaps we should discuss this matter through diplomatic channels." Thane watched the exchange with growing unease. The human spoke like someone holding strong cards in a game of chance. Her confidence seemed genuine, not the false bravado of someone trying to bluff their way out of trouble. But what could 12 apparently unarmed ships do against 200 heavily armed Corvani warships? "Diplomacy," Corex repeated, his voice dripping with contempt. "You face the full might of the Corvani fleet with toy ships and you speak of diplomacy? Surrender now or we will demonstrate why every civilized species fears our battle prowess." Captain Blake's expression remained unchanged. Admiral, I strongly advise against hostile action. Our ships are fully capable of defending themselves and others in this region. Please reconsider your position. The transmission ended, leaving the Corvani command center in tense silence. Admiral Corex turned to face his officers, his eyes blazing with anger at what he saw as human arrogance. Scan their vessels again, he ordered. There must be something we missed. No species builds warships without weapons. It would be suicide. As sensor sweeps began again, Thane felt a strange chill run down his spine. The human captain had spoken with absolute certainty about her ship's defensive capabilities. Either she was completely insane, or the Corvani fleet was missing something very important about human military technology. Lieutenant Kev stared at his sensor readings and rubbed his eyes with the back of his clawed hand. The numbers kept changing in ways that made no sense. For the past 20 minutes, ever since the human captain had suggested diplomatic talks, strange energy patterns had been dancing across his screens like ghosts in the machine. Sir, he called to Commander Thane, his voice uncertain. The human ships are producing some kind of low-frequency vibrations. It is almost like they are humming. Thane walked over to the sensor station and leaned down to examine the data. The readings showed tiny fluctuations in the space around the human fleet. Gravitational waves pulsed in regular patterns. Subspace itself seemed to ripple and bend near their hulls. The effect was so subtle that their equipment could barely detect it, but it was definitely there. Humming, Thane repeated slowly. Are their engines malfunctioning? I do not think so, sir. The patterns are too regular, too controlled. It is like they are doing it on purpose. Admiral Corex had been pacing back and forth across the command deck for 10 minutes, growing more frustrated with each diplomatic message from the humans. Captain Blake continued to request negotiations while her ships held their formation without making any aggressive moves. To Corex this looked like a delaying tactic. They are stalling, he announced to his officers. Probably calling for reinforcements or trying to find a way to escape. No military commander talks this much unless they are afraid to fight. Captain Drell nodded in agreement. Their behavior does seem strange, sir. They speak of defending themselves but they show no weapons. They maintain battle formation but they refuse to attack or retreat. It is like they want us to make the first move. The communication officer looked up from her station. Admiral, Captain Blake is requesting another conference. She says she has important information about territorial boundaries that might resolve this conflict peacefully. Corex stopped pacing and turned toward the main display. His patience had reached its limit. In his experience, enemies who wanted to talk instead of fight were enemies who could not fight. The humans were obviously trying to buy time until help arrived. No more talking, he declared. We will show these humans what happens when they challenge the Corvani Empire. Commander Thane felt his stomach tighten with worry. Something about this situation felt wrong, but he could not identify exactly what bothered him. The humans acted too confident for people facing impossible odds. Their ships continued to produce those strange energy readings that his sensors could not properly explain. Most disturbing of all, Captain Blake had shown no fear when Admiral Corex threatened her. Admiral, Thane said carefully, perhaps we should study their technology more before engaging. These energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. Enough, Corex snapped. I have conquered 17 star systems and destroyed countless enemy fleets. I will not be intimidated by smooth-hulled ships that cannot even mount proper weapons. He turned to the weapons officer. Target their flagship with a single plasma bolt. Low power. Just enough to damage their shields and show them we mean business. The weapons officer hesitated for a moment, then pressed the firing controls. A brilliant stream of superheated plasma erupted from the main cannon of the Corvani flagship. The bolt streaked across space toward the human formation, leaving a trail of charged particles in its wake. On the tactical display, they watched the plasma bolt strike the shields of the human destroyer positioned at the front of their formation. The energy discharge lit up the darkness like a miniature star as enough destructive force to level a city hit the alien vessel. The human ship did not move. It did not shake or wobble or show any sign of damage. The plasma bolt simply disappeared into the shield barrier as if it had been absorbed by a sponge. What? Admiral Corex stared at the display in disbelief. Run the scan again. Check shield strength. Lieutenant Cav's claws clicked rapidly across his control panel as he ran every sensor sweep available. Sir, their shields are operating at normal levels. The plasma bolt had no effect at all. It is as if we fired at empty space. Impossible, Captain Drell whispered. That was enough energy to destroy a battle cruiser. The communication officer's station chimed with an incoming message. Captain Blake appeared on the main screen again, and Thane noticed that her expression had changed. She no longer looked patient and diplomatic. Now she looked disappointed, like a teacher whose student had just made a serious mistake. "Admiral Corax," she said, her voice still calm but carrying a new edge. "That was very unwise. You have just committed an act of war against Earth Defense Forces. I gave you multiple opportunities to resolve this peacefully." Corax stepped forward, his anger overriding his confusion about the failed attack. "Your shields will not protect you when we use full power, human. Surrender now or watch your fleet burn." Captain Blake shook her head slowly. "Admiral, you still do not understand what you are facing. Our ships do not need visible weapons because we learned long ago that the most effective tools are often the ones your enemy cannot see." She paused and looked directly at Corax through the screen. "You fired the first shot. What happens next is your responsibility." The transmission ended, leaving the Corvani command center in stunned silence. Admiral Corax stared at the blank screen, his mind struggling to process what had just occurred. His most powerful weapon had been completely useless against human shields that should not have been able to stop such an attack. "Sir," Lieutenant Cav said quietly, "the energy readings from their ships are increasing. Whatever they were doing before, they are doing it much faster now." Commander Thane watched the tactical display as the human fleet began to move. Their formation shifted with mechanical precision, and those mysterious vibrations in space grew stronger. He had the terrible feeling that they were about to discover exactly what human ships could do without visible weapons. Admiral Corax felt his blood boil as he stared at the human fleet. The failed plasma shot had been embarrassing, but he refused to believe that 12 small ships could stand against his entire armada. The humans were using some kind of trick, probably advanced shield technology they had stolen from a more developed species. "All ships, prepare for full assault," he commanded into his communication device. "Target every human vessel simultaneously. Use maximum firepower. Show them what real weapons can do." Across the Corvani fleet, 200 warships powered up their weapon systems. Plasma cannons glowed white-hot as they charged to full capacity. Missile tubes loaded their deadliest warheads. Kinetic railguns hummed with electromagnetic energy as they prepared to launch projectiles at incredible speeds. Commander Thane watched the weapons display with growing unease. The combined firepower of their fleet could crack a planet in half. Surely no shield system, no matter how advanced, could withstand such devastating force. "Admiral," he said carefully, "are you certain we want to destroy them completely? If they have advanced technology, we might want to capture some of their ships for study." Corax turned toward him with blazing eyes. They had their chance to surrender. Now they will learn why every civilized species fears the Corvani Empire. The human ships remained in perfect formation, apparently unconcerned by the massive weapons pointed at them. Their hulls continued to produce those strange energy readings that Lieutenant Cav could not identify. If anything, the mysterious vibrations had grown stronger since the warning shot. "Fire all weapons," Admiral Corax shouted. Space exploded into brilliant light as 200 warships unleashed destruction beyond imagination. Plasma bolts thick as city blocks streaked toward the human formation. Missiles by the thousands swarmed through space, their nuclear warheads ready to vaporize anything they touched. Kinetic rounds moving at nearly the speed of light created trails of superheated particles as they cut through the void. The barrage was so intense that the tactical displays overloaded trying to track every projectile. The empty space between the fleets became a blazing wall of death that no living thing should have been able to survive. For 30 seconds, the weapon's fire continued without pause. When it finally stopped, the Corvani officers stared at their screens in shocked silence. Where the human fleet should have been nothing but scattered debris, 12 ships still floated in perfect formation. Not one human vessel showed the slightest damage. "Impossible," Captain Drell whispered. "Nothing can survive that level of destruction." Lieutenant Cav's claws rattled against his control panel as he ran scan after scan. "Sir, their shields absorbed everything. Every plasma bolt, every missile, every kinetic round. It is as if they have barriers made of solid space itself." Admiral Corax felt his confidence cracking like ice in warm water. His proudest moment as a military commander had been the Battle of Xerion, where his fleet had destroyed an entire enemy armada in minutes. But those ships had fought back, had taken damage, had shown proper fear before they died. These humans simply stood there and let 200 warships shoot at them without effect. The communication system activated, and Captain Blake's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression was no longer calm or diplomatic. Now she looked like a predator that had decided to stop playing with its food. "Admiral Corax," she said, her voice carrying a tone that made Thane's scales prickle with instinctive fear. "We tried diplomacy. We gave you multiple warnings. We even absorbed your opening attack without retaliation." She leaned forward in her command chair. "You chose war. Very well. All human vessels, you are authorized to engage hostile targets. Rules of engagement are unrestricted." The transmission ended, but this time something different happened. The human ships began to move, but not in any way that Thane recognized from military tactics. Instead of turning to present weapon batteries or opening missile ports, they simply rotated to face the Corvani fleet directly. Their smooth hulls caught starlight and reflected it back like mirrors. There were still no visible weapons, no gun barrels extending, no ports opening to reveal hidden armaments. The ships just hung in space, pointing at their enemies like arrows aimed at targets. "What are they doing?" Admiral Corex demanded. "Where are their weapons?" Before anyone could answer, space itself seemed to shiver. Lieutenant Cav's sensor readings exploded with data he could not understand. Gravitational fields twisted and bent around the human ships. Subspace rippled like water disturbed by thrown stones. Reality itself appeared to be bending around those mirror-bright hulls. Then the first Corvani cruiser simply came apart. There was no explosion, no visible beam or projectile. The ship just began separating along invisible lines, its hull peeling away in neat sections as if some giant hand was carefully taking it apart piece by piece. The crew inside had no time to scream before their vessel collapsed into scattered metal. "What happened?" Corex shouted. "What weapon did they use?" 3 more Corvani ships suffered the same fate in rapid succession. Their hulls opened like flowers blooming in reverse, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. The crews inside were gone before they could even send distress signals. Commander Thane stared at the tactical display in horror as he finally understood what he was seeing. The human ships had no external weapons because they did not need them. They had turned their entire vessels into weapons that could manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. "Admiral," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I do not think they have weapons. I think they are weapons." Admiral Corex looked at him with confusion and growing terror. "What do you mean?" "Their ships are not carrying armaments," Thane explained as more Corvani vessels died around them. "Their ships are the armaments. They have weaponized physics itself." The battle became a nightmare that Admiral Corex had never imagined possible. Human ships moved through his fleet like deadly ghosts, their smooth hulls cutting through space in ways that violated everything he knew about physics. They did not fire weapons in any recognizable sense. Instead, they simply pointed themselves at Corvani vessels and made reality bend around their targets. Commander Thane watched in fascination and terror as a human destroyer approached a squadron of Corvani frigates. The enemy ship made no threatening gestures, displayed no weapon systems, and showed no signs of aggression beyond its steady advance. Yet as it drew closer, the space around the frigates began to twist and warp. "Lieutenant Cav," Thane called out, his voice tight with strain. "What are your sensors reading from that human ship?" Cav's claws clicked frantically across his control panel as he tried to make sense of the impossible data flowing across his screens. "Sir, it is generating massive gravitational distortions. The readings suggest it is manipulating spacetime itself, creating localized fields of intense gravity." As they watched, one of the Corvani frigates began to stretch like heated metal. Its hull elongated as gravitational forces pulled it in different directions simultaneously. The ship's structure could not withstand the stress, and it tore itself apart from the inside out. The crew never had a chance to escape. "How is this possible?" Captain Drell whispered, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "No species has ever weaponized gravity itself." Another human vessel, this one resembling a sleek knife blade, demonstrated a different form of destruction. As it passed near a Corvani heavy cruiser, space around the target ship simply ceased to exist. A perfect sphere of nothingness appeared in the cruiser's center, instantly removing everything within its boundaries. The remaining portions of the ship collapsed inward to fill the void, crushing the survivors in seconds. Admiral Corex felt his understanding of warfare crumble like sand in his claws. For 2,000 years, his people had built bigger guns, stronger armor, and more powerful shields. They had competed with other species to create the most devastating weapons possible. But the humans had taken a completely different approach. "They are not using weapons," he said, his voice hollow with realization. "They have made their ships into tools that control the fundamental forces of the universe." A human battleship glided past the Corvani flagship, close enough that Corex could see his reflection in its mirror-bright hull. As it moved, he felt the artificial gravity on his own ship fluctuate wildly. His stomach lurched as up and down became meaningless concepts. The deck plating groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle. "Admiral," Lieutenant Cav reported, his voice shaking, "that ship is swimming through space-time like a fish through water. It is treating the fabric of reality as something it can push against and manipulate." The human vessel continued past without attacking, but its mere presence had demonstrated something terrifying. If the humans wanted to destroy the Corvani flagship, they could do it simply by flying close enough to tear the ship apart with gravitational forces. Commander Thane studied the tactical display as more of his fleet disappeared. Each human ship seemed to specialize in different methods of destruction. Some created spatial distortions that folded space around their targets, crushing them into impossibly small points. Others opened tiers in reality that swallowed entire vessels, sending them into unknown dimensions from which there was no return. "Sir," he said to Admiral Corex, "their entire military doctrine is based on physics manipulation. They do not mount weapons on their ships because the ships themselves are weapons. The smooth hulls are not a design weakness, they are focusing arrays for exotic matter manipulation." A human light cruiser demonstrated this principle as it engaged 3 Corvani destroyers simultaneously. The ship rotated slowly, its hull surface rippling with barely visible energy patterns. As it turned, beams of twisted space lanced out from different points along its length. The beams were invisible to normal sight, but their effects were devastating. The first Corvani destroyer simply vanished, displaced into some other location in space or time. The second began to age rapidly, its hull corroding and crumbling as decades passed in seconds. The third ship's crew found themselves experiencing time in reverse, watching their own actions undo themselves until they ceased to exist. "This is impossible," Captain Drell said, his voice breaking with strain. "They are using weapons that should not be able to exist. How can anyone control time and space with such precision?" Lieutenant Cav looked up from his sensors with an expression of awed terror. "Sir, I think I understand how they do it. Their ships are not built around traditional power cores. Each vessel appears to contain some form of exotic matter, possibly artificial black holes or condensed spacetime itself. They are using the fundamental forces of physics as their ammunition." Admiral Corex watched his proud armada dissolve before his eyes. Ships that had conquered star systems and brought entire civilizations to their knees were being destroyed by enemies that treated the laws of physics like tools in a workshop. The humans had not just advanced beyond conventional weapons, they had made conventional weapons completely obsolete. A human dreadnought approached the main battle formation, its massive hull reflecting the explosions and destruction around it. As it moved, reality seemed to bend and flow around its presence. Space itself appeared to be made of liquid that parted before the ship's advance. "All remaining ships," Corex ordered, his pride finally broken by the magnitude of what he faced, "begin immediate retreat. We cannot fight enemies who have turned the universe itself into their weapon." As the surviving Corvani vessels fled, Commander Thane took one last look at the human fleet. They had not lost a single ship, had barely taken any damage at all. They simply floated in space like beautiful predators, their mirror hulls reflecting the debris of their enemies. The surviving Corvani ships limped through hyperspace toward their home system, carrying news that would change everything the galaxy understood about warfare. Admiral Corex sat in his command chair like a broken statue, staring at the damage reports that told the story of complete defeat. Of his original fleet of 200 warships, only 28 remained functional enough to make the journey home. Commander Thane stood beside him, reviewing the sensor data they had collected during the battle. The readings seemed impossible even now, hours after the encounter. The human ships had demonstrated control over fundamental forces that most species barely understood, let alone weaponized. "Sir," Thane said quietly, "I have been studying the attack patterns. Each human vessel appears to specialize in different methods of physics manipulation. Some focused on gravitational distortion, others on spatial displacement, still others on temporal manipulation." Admiral Corex finally looked up from his reports. His eyes held the hollow stare of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered. "How long do you think they have had this technology?" "Based on the precision of their attacks and the coordination between ships, I would estimate decades of development. Perhaps longer. This is not something they invented recently. They have built their entire military around these principles." Lieutenant Cav approached from his sensor station, carrying a data pad filled with measurements and analysis. His scales were still pale from the shock of what they had witnessed. "Admiral, I have completed my study of the human weapon systems," he reported. "The ships themselves are not just weapons, they are weapons that reshape reality around their targets. They have turned physics into ammunition and spacetime into their battlefield. The communication officer looked up from her station. Sir, we are receiving priority transmissions from High Command. They want immediate reports on the engagement. Corex nodded slowly. He knew that his career was over, but the information they carried was too important to delay. The galaxy needed to know what humanity had become. Prepare a full tactical briefing, he ordered. Include all sensor data and battle recordings. Every spacefaring civilization must understand what we have encountered. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the human flagship Defiance, Captain Emma Blake stood before the main viewscreen watching the retreating alien vessels disappear into hyperspace. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant James Murphy, approached with his own report. Captain, the enemy fleet has withdrawn completely. No casualties on our side. Minimal shield drain across the fleet. Blake nodded but did not smile. There was no joy in demonstrating humanity's military capabilities, even when facing aggression from alien forces. She had hoped the Corvani would accept diplomatic solutions, but their attack had forced her hand. Any communication from the retreating ships? She asked. No, Captain. They departed without sending any messages. However, our long-range sensors detected multiple data transmissions being sent toward what appears to be their home system. Blake understood the implications. Within hours, news of this encounter would spread through the galactic community. Every species would learn that human ships possessed capabilities that made traditional military thinking obsolete. James, she said, turning to face her officer, do you think we did the right thing? Lieutenant Murphy considered the question carefully. Captain, they fired first. They refused multiple diplomatic offers. We gave them every chance to avoid conflict. That is not what I meant, Blake replied. I mean revealing our true capabilities. For decades, we have been careful to hide the full extent of our technology. Now the secret is out. Murphy nodded in understanding. Humanity had spent years developing their reality manipulation technology in secret, allowing other species to believe that Earth was a minor power with primitive weapons. This deception had prevented larger conflicts and given humanity time to perfect their defenses. Captain, perhaps it was time, he said. Our exploration fleets are encountering more aggressive species as we expand outward. Word of our capabilities might prevent future attacks. On the Corvani homeworld, High Command gathered in emergency session to review Admiral Corex's report. The assembled military leaders read the battle analysis with growing alarm. The descriptions seemed like science fiction rather than tactical intelligence. General Vex, Supreme Commander of all Corvani forces, studied the sensor recordings with the help of their best scientists and engineers. The data showed human ships manipulating gravity, time, and space itself as weapons. It was technology that exceeded their most advanced theoretical research by centuries. Are we certain this data is accurate? He asked his science advisor. General, we have verified the recordings multiple times. The sensor readings are consistent and show no signs of tampering. The humans have achieved mastery over fundamental forces that we barely understand. Within 3 days, encrypted reports spread through the galactic communication networks. Every major civilization received detailed accounts of the battle and analysis of human capabilities. The news created shock waves through military and political establishments across dozens of star systems. The Terran Federation found themselves suddenly thrust into the spotlight as a major galactic power. Diplomatic requests flooded their communication channels from species that had previously ignored humanity. Trade offers, alliance proposals, and territorial agreements arrived daily from civilizations eager to avoid conflict with Earth's reality-bending warships. Captain Blake received new orders from Earth Defense Command to lead a diplomatic mission to several key systems. Humanity's secret was out, and now they had to manage the consequences of their revealed power. As the Defiance prepared for its diplomatic mission, Blake stood in her ready room looking at star charts of the local galactic region. Every marked system now represented potential allies or enemies who knew exactly what human ships could do. Computer, she said aloud, record personal log. The age of humanity hiding in the shadows is over. We have shown the galaxy that we do not need visible weapons because we have learned to weaponize reality itself. Now we must prove that power can be used responsibly. The galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had emerged as a force that treated the fundamental laws of physics as tools of war, and everyone else would have to adapt to this new reality.